Good afternoon. My name is Loretta DeSimone. I am the director for the Bronxville Senior Citizens. We're here at the Reformed Church today with Ellen Edwards of the Bronxville Green Committee, who's going to describe some of the programs that are offered. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming on a beautiful day. It's actually turned beautiful. The Bronxville Green Committee is part of village government, and that's what I really want to get across, is that we work with the trustees. There's 5 trustees in Bronxville, including the mayor, and everything that we do is generated by them or initiated by them or by us, and we work together to implement these programs. So it's really because they're short-staffed and it's really hard to do all the extra green stuff. We help them by doing research, getting proposals together, doing some of the background work that they need so that they can then thoughtfully consider our proposals and either give their approval or ask us to change them. So over the years, we've worked out a really good relationship. They're incredibly supportive. Helen Knapp is one of the trustees who works especially closely with us on a regular basis for our programs. So I'm going to go quickly through our programs, and then maybe you can tell me which ones you're more interested in, and I can go into those a little bit more depth. I also want to explain in a little bit more depth the food scrap recycling program, which is something that all of you, if you live in the village of Bronxville, can participate in. So as you know, there were 2 programs when I stepped on as chair several years ago. One was the Giving Garden, which is located on Village Hall property on the corner of Gramerton and Pondfield Road. And that's a community garden where we raise vegetables and herbs, and everything we raise is donated to food banks. So we've worked primarily with ECAP in Tuckahoe, and then community service associates in Mount Vernon, donating these fresh vegetables. In Mount Vernon, they actually turn them into soup and meals for people. They serve about 80 people a week, I believe. And in ECAP, it's more of a food pantry where they have shelves of food, and then they include fresh vegetables as part of the offerings of that week, and people add them to their bags. But it's really important for us that we're trying to address food insecurity through the Giving Garden. And we've raised, last season, it was about 350 pounds of vegetables. And Farmer Dave, who's been in this project from the very beginning, we're in our 6th season now, he actually made pesto out of the basil that he produced, so then he donated the pesto as well. The other program that was ongoing when I started is Take Back Day, which we have twice a year in June and November. It's a time of recycling. So the county shredder is made available on that day. In the last couple of years, it's been at the elementary school parking lot, and you can bring all your sensitive documents there and have them shredded. When it gets full, then it's done and for the day. And then we also, with the help of the DPW, the Department of Public Works in Bronxville, we collect electronics, which are taken up to Valhalla, which is a collection site, and they're disassembled. The parts that can be reused and recycled are sent back to manufacturers. It's a really complex program, but really important because electronics are full of toxic materials. We also collect clothing. Big Brothers Big Sisters has been a partner for a long time. We collect textiles for animal shelters, and every once in a while we try to mix it up and add another thing that we can take back. So we encourage you to, it's also an opportunity to really raise your awareness about recycling. And before you go, I hope you'll all get these sheets, which I have out there, which explain all our programs, and especially on the back have a whole page about recycling. And then a year ago, December, we finally were able to start the food scrap recycling program. So this is a residential recycling program where you can collect your food scraps, all food waste, in fact. We sell kits, so I have one of these on my counter. I live in an apartment. You line it with a compostable bag, and these are supplied by the village as well. And then every single kind of food you can imagine goes in there, including shells and bones. And then you have to take it to the drop-off site, which is located behind Village Hall. So if you do about once a week, it usually works out really well. They collect it once a week from there. They haul it to a commercial composting facility, And in about 3 months, it's turned into soil. And then, just so you know, this Saturday from, I'm not sure if it's 10 to 12 or 10 to 2, we're still sort of working that out, but my colleague and I are disagreeing about the time, but we're gonna have what we call Compost Give Back Day. So there's gonna be a huge pile of compost that's made from our food scraps, and anybody can come with your own bucket and pick up some compost for your gardens, your container plants, anything you want to use it for. And it'll also be an opportunity for us to further explain the food scrap recycling program. We do sell these kits. These are kits that the village purchased and then resells to residents. So in addition to this countertop pail with the liners and some material, brochures, you can buy this one. It's included in the kit. And the idea is that when this gets full, you put them in there, and when you've got 5 or 6 in about a week, then you take it over to the drop-off spot.
Can you hold that up for a moment?
Sure. So this is the toter bag, and it locks, it's got a handle. However, I find that a lot of people that live in apartment buildings don't necessarily use the toter. I walk my food scraps over. I just live in Midland Gardens and I walk them over. So I just use my own little bag. So then that allows me to continue on and do the rest of my errands. And that's just too bulky to be carrying around. So I find that a lot of people in apartments work out their own systems, and you can participate in the program without buying this kit at all. Some people actually put their food scraps in their freezer. I don't know how they have room in their freezer, but some of them do. And then they don't have to go as often to the drop-off site. Other people just use the countertop but not the toter, or they use their own receptacle, and that's perfectly fine too. So there's lots of ways to participate in the program. But it's a really great way to reduce the amount of trash that the town pays for to take all the way up to Peekskill to be burned. And food scraps don't burn very well. They're really not meant to be burned. They're meant to be turned back into soil to complete that natural cycle of returning their nutrients to the earth. So this is a terrific program that just sort of, I don't know why we ever got away from this kind of thing, but it should have been in place forever. And if enough people participate, the hope is that eventually we'll have curbside pickup and you won't have to actually go somewhere to drop it off. So that's the hope. Other programs that we're involved in get more complicated. The Climate Smart Communities program is a state program that we found out about, and it's a program that helps municipalities. It sort of gives them a framework as they try to address climate change, and it includes about 100 action steps that you can take in all sorts of areas to reduce your emissions. And in September of this past year, we did enough action steps. Each action step is worth a certain number of points, and then the goal is to get 120 points, and then you get bronze certification. So last September, Bronxville got bronze certification because we'd completed about 26 action steps. Some of this was things that the village had already accomplished, but they needed to be documented for the state to get those points. So things like they had already turned their traffic lights into LED traffic lights, which are much more efficient. But I had to go around and take a picture of every single traffic light. And when you're on a corner like Midland and Pondfield, there's a lot of traffic lights in that one spot. So I've still got a lot of traffic lights in my computer. But just a picture of them all and documenting that they were indeed working. They had to be operable. And that earned us a couple points. So those are the kinds of things. 2 big steps we took as part of that program were our greenhouse gas inventories, which was so formidable to me, and I would not have been able to do it, my team would not have been able to do it, except for one amazing volunteer, a woman named Carol Upshur, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Massachusetts and had worked on big grant studies. She knew how to deal with big databases and charts and graphs and numbers and statistics, and she did them all. We had to write to Con Ed to get, believe it or not, Con Ed knows how much electricity Bronxville uses. The New York Power Authority is what the municipal operations uses, and they know exactly how many kilowatts the village burns. And that includes all the street lights, which is part of the municipal operations and the biggest source of emissions. that we found out fuel oil and gas consumption. We contacted the hospital, and eventually they came through with some data. So that was a big, heavy lift to do climate or greenhouse gas inventories for both the municipal operations and the community as a whole. And now we're in the process of taking those municipal operations data and trying to come up with a climate action plan. So this is a plan that between now and 2030 would allow us to reduce all the emissions from the government operations in the village 40% within the next 7 years. That's the state goal, and that's our goal. It's enshrined in New York State law, the Community Leadership and Climate Protection Act, and we're really trying to follow that law. It's a big challenge to do that, but we're really getting into the weeds and figuring out how many police cars do we need to convert to electric vehicles, how much energy do we have to save in our buildings, how can we do that? So it's a big challenge, and we're in the midst of it right now. We get help from the state. They run webinars that give us some direction in that regard. And then we sit down with the local officials, and we're going to have to really work out with them. What are you willing to do? What do you think is possible? What ordinances do we need to pass in order to make this more likely that it will happen? So it's really getting into the weeds as we really, really work to reduce actual emissions. And then the Green Committee does things like related, but more to do with the residents. This past winter, we ran an Energy Smart Community or Energy Smart Homes campaign. I wrote 6 articles in my hometown Bronxville associated with it. We worked with Sustainable Westchester, which is a nonprofit in Westchester that really helps all of the municipalities in Westchester reach these goals. And they ran a webinar. They give us support documentation. They had testimonials that we could use in our promotion. And the idea is to inform people about how you can retrofit your home from gas or fuel oil to make it an all-electric home. And the goal is that since electricity can be sustainably produced by wind and solar and hydropower, as we electrify our homes, we make them energy efficient and clean, using clean technology, and we can eventually get rid of our fossil fuel burning systems. So this is a heavier lift. It requires investment of time and money from residents, and this was also limited just to people who live in single-family homes. So right now we have a number of people who are participating by getting home energy audits, which is sort of the first step in that program, where somebody comes in and takes a look at your home, checks out the insulation, where are the leaks, what relatively small changes can you make that would tighten up the envelope of your home. Then the next step would be supposedly to consider heat pumps, which are run on electricity. They don't burn anything, they just move heat and cold around. They work for both heating and cooling. And if you change over to that, you can often decommission your fossil fuel system completely. And then the third step would be solar panels on your roof, if your roof is appropriate for it. So those 3 big steps would ultimately get you to net zero in your home energy use, and you'd be an entirely clean. All the energy that you use in your home would be clean energy. So again, this is an ongoing program. We're going to continue to roll it out year after year and keep encouraging people. There's many benefits. Over time you can save money. It's a big upfront cost, but over time you actually save money because these systems are very efficient. And many people say they're more comfortable, they're cleaner, you're not burning anything in your home, so you don't have those fumes. And they're just healthier for everybody as well. So it's something to consider. Let's see, another big one, a really big part of our program, but something we haven't been able to devote as many resources to, is healthy yards and pollinator pathways. So everybody knows about climate change. Many people may not be aware that scientists are saying that the loss of biodiversity is as big a problem as climate change as we look to the future. Birds and insect populations are just plummeting all over the place, and it has a cascading effect on the whole food chain and the natural ecosystem. So we realized in the past couple of years that, actually in probably the last decade to 15 years, that our actually the way we landscape our lawns is contributing to this problem, and we had no idea. By bringing in ornamental trees that have really originated in Asia and Europe, those plants are not adapted to provide the food and habitat that the local birds and bees need. So they may be able to take nectar from one plant, but they can't lay their eggs on it, or the babies can't feed from it. So that has been broken. And even lawn, we've realized, doesn't really help them very much. Unless you've got clover, you know, sort of the worst lawn is the best lawn for the pollinators. If you've got clover and dandelions, you're probably helping them out. But if you've got a really pristine lawn of Kentucky bluegrass, that's not doing anything for the local pollinators or local insects and animals. So we're realizing this is, you know, requiring a transformation in the way that we take care of our lawns. And the lawn care companies are not yet on board. I did talk to Joseph Bolfamonte last week, and I have to give him credit. He's buying electric lawn care equipment for his operation, and he's the first one. So good for him. And he says everybody else is mad at him. All the other landscapers are mad at him because they don't want to go there yet. It's much more expensive to get that electric equipment. But that, you know, when you find out what emissions come from those blowers, the lawn mowers, the trimmers, it's just appalling how dirty they are and how bad for our health they are, as well as the noise. So electric is so much better. But in addition, the poor landscapers really have to learn a whole new way of managing their landscapes. And that includes things like, don't blow the leaves away, leave them in place. Mulch them on the lawn so that the nutrients can return to the soil. Leave them whole around your plantings, because that's where the pollinators are going to live on the winter. And if it's bare, there's no place for them to lay their eggs or have habitat over the winter. So little things like that, you know, it's a whole revolution in the way we look at our lawns, the way we think about them. And it also opens up a whole new world of plants. The native plants I'm learning about, and there are things I'd never heard about before. I had no idea. We planted Norway maples on my front lawn when I was a kid, and now I know they're a terrible plant. They are probably still sold in nurseries, but they spread all over the place. And in the forest, their leaves come out so much earlier, and they're so big that they shade out all the native plants underneath so that they can't even grow. So that's just one small way. Even the fact that English ivy, which I loved as a kid, has escaped into the woods or in your yard. It's crawling up our trees and smothering them. It's smothering trees in the forests now, things like that. It's an invasive plant, and it's from England. So it's so much better to marry in your yard the native plants so that you can support the native populations of insects. And it also, there's an organization called Homegrown National Parks led by Doug Ptolemy, who's an entomologist from Delaware. And he's the one who's really spearheading a lot of this movement. But he said, our lawns our yards are dead because our plants are not, you know, encouraging the introduction of other animals. Once you bring in these native plants, the birds come back. The flies and the moths come back. Some of them you might think, oh, I don't like insects, you know, but most of them are beneficial. Something like 95% of insects are really beneficial, and they support the whole food chain that goes up to the songbirds and other things. Songbirds, I've learned, baby songbirds need something like a nest of baby songbirds need something like 4,000 caterpillars before they're fledged. And all of those caterpillars come from insects originally. So if you don't have a tree or a plant that supports that and produces the caterpillars, you're not going to have baby songbirds, and you're not going to have those beautiful butterflies. So this is a whole revolution. We do have a Bronxville Pollinator Pathway group, which we haven't had many projects with them, but if you ever decide to plant a native plant in your native garden in your yard, we're happy to give you a sign that says Bronxville Pollinator Pathway. The idea is that as we build all these native gardens and link them up, it provides a pathway for the pollinators to follow. And this is a group that started in Connecticut, actually, in Fairfield County, has moved into Westchester. Bedford's very active in this area. Hudson is too. And we're hoping that eventually we'll have enough native gardens to start linking them up so that the pollinators will be able to have a pathway. Many of them don't really fly or travel very far in their whole life cycle. So if, just a half a mile might make a difference instead of these little fragmented gardens. So this is an area that we would love to have more volunteers in so that we can do more programming in that area. And we do have a native plant garden in Alfredo Dog Park, which is the unofficially named dog park. I don't know if you know where it is. It's off Archer Place, way on the other side of town, near Dusenberry Street, on the other side of 22. But a lot of people take their dogs there and they take them off leash, but a wonderful volunteer, Ben Lentz, has been gradually pulling out all the invasive plants in that area and having different groups plant gardens around the edges. He didn't know anything about native plants when we started out, and he's now a total convert, and almost all the gardens going in there are native gardens. And then across the road is the Nature Preserve, which was created by some leaders in the village a number of years ago. And they have a wonderful native plant garden called Olivia's Garden, which is a great example of a mature native plant garden. It's tended by Nature's Cradle, and it's really lovely. The plants are over 6 feet tall, and their flowers, they're just amazing. So go in the middle of the summer and you'll really have a treat.
Do you have an address for all these places?
Alfredo Dog Park doesn't really have an exact address, but if you go down Pondfield, cross 22, and just where you make that dog leg turn and to turn into Siwanoy, turn into Siwanoy on the left as if you were going to go there, but then take the next left fork and you'll end up at the at Archer Road, which is between the Nature Preserve and the Alfredo Dog Park.
Near the grammar school there?
Yes, it's near the grammar school. It's a Tuckahoe Grammar School, so you can see that, right? It's sort of almost across the street from it. So it's a lovely little area. Bronxville does not have a lot of public parks, and that by actual acreage, that's probably one of the biggest areas that we have, aside from the schoolyard. So it's really worth a visit. And then another aspect, something else we're working on a lot are trees. Jack Beerworth is a resident, and he's become my tree guy, and he's working with the village. We're not sure exactly what we're going to end up with, but the village is considering a tree ordinance. We're losing a lot of trees unfortunately, especially in people's yards, which we really can't control much. But what they're considering is a permitting process and replacement requirement, where people, if they were going to take down a tree that was perfectly healthy, they would have to get a permit for it, and then they would have to replace it with something. So that's still in the works. They're still mulling over the size of the tree that would be required to have a permit. But in the meantime, Jack is working with some other organizations in town, and we're hoping to come up with something that helps us to manage our public trees a little bit better. Maybe an inventory of all the trees and a management plan so that we would have a regular pruning cycle, and we'd maybe a regular planting schedule so that on a very regular basis we would be replacing them or filling in empty spots with public trees. Already Bronxville has a pretty big budget for a small town for public trees, but you can always do more. There's always trees that are getting sick and diseased and falling down in storms. So it's a challenge to keep up our tree canopy. We inherited a lovely, lovely tree canopy, and many of those trees were here before the roads were laid out or the homes were built, and as a result, they're the kind of tree you can't really replace. If you have a tree was in a forest and the trunk went up 50 feet without any branching, and now it's just this lovely canopy over a 3-story home, it's really hard to replicate that when that kind of tree falls down, because you're going to get branching lower and it's going to obstruct it in ways that people don't necessarily like. but at the same time, it's really important to replace those big canopy trees. The same way that, there are some trees that are grown out of cracks in the bedrock, and that was some little acorn made its way in there, and over the years it just kept growing. But now I have a feeling if we see that, we're pulling it out and we're not letting it grow. And you're not going to be able to plant a tree in that place, with any kind of intention. So it's a real challenge. But trees do so much, and they are going to be so crucial as the climate warms even more, because under a shade tree can be 10 degrees cooler than in, and with the reflection off the pavement and everything, you get these heat islands that are just atrocious. So trees have an enormous cooling benefit. A single oak tree can support 500 species. That's what Doug Ptolemy says. He's counted. He's an entomologist. He's counted. It's hard to believe, but between all the little bugs that live in the branches and in the bark and get support by what's ever underneath and in the leaves, it's just amazing. So trees are just incredibly important, and we need to figure out ways to really support them and really encourage people to not chop down their trees. I'm not sure why they do it sometimes, but I've noticed around town that recently a couple homes seem denuded of their trees, and I'm not sure why they've been taken down. Obviously, when the tree becomes diseased, you have to take it down, but and we're always afraid of trees falling on people's property, so we have to be really careful in a heavily built-up area like this. But they're just so important, and they're beautiful. I think that's pretty much what we're working on so far. Just another thing I wanted to mention, we have so many programs going on in this Earth Month, but the Compost Give Back Day is this Saturday from 10 to 2. And then the following weekend, Friday the 28th is Arbor Day. The town is going to be planting a tree. I'm still trying to get details out of the village, so I can't say exactly when or where it's going to be. We're also going to have a library display about trees at the public library, so take a look at that. It's right in the foyer across from the checkout desk. Wamrath Books is going to have a window display about trees that we're going to be putting up this coming weekend. And then the following Saturday, the 29th, in Eastchester Library parking lot, we're having an EV event. So this is your chance to check out your electric vehicle of the future. So it's just, their Beeline bus is going to have an electric bus. The county's providing a Ford Mach 5 police vehicle that's fully electric and outfitted for police activity. And then a lot of people are going to be bringing their own cars just to demonstrate, to show them off. Maybe somebody will actually let you have a test drive, I'm not sure. And they're also going to have people from the utilities to talk about their programs. There's going to be people who run charging stations. There are going to be electricians who can explain how you can put an outlet in your home to plug in your EV vehicle. So that's important. A lot of people have a lot of questions about that. So I encourage you. It's just 2 hours, 10 to noon, really quick and sweet. Bring the whole family. It's just really, I think, fun to just sort of explore them. And I know I have a lot of, I drive the most simple car you can imagine. It still has a key to open the doors. So to go from there to the technology of an EV scares me to death. And my friend's Tesla is too much for me.
Where is that?
It's going to be the Eastchester Library parking lot. I think it's Oak Lane, but it's right off 22 from 10 to 12 on the April 29th. So come one and come all. So do people have questions? I'd love to answer your questions. Yes?
This tabletop scrap that you have, it has perforations. Do you smell the food when it's sitting on your counter?
Yeah. The question is, do I smell the food when it's sitting on the counter in this perforation? And actually, no. That is actually there to release the moisture, and the moisture is what makes it smell. So the fact that it's getting out is allowing it to not smell. I smell it when I open it a little bit, but never when it's closed. And again, you know, it's going to get filled up fairly quickly, and you're going to transfer it to something else. So it's not sitting on your counter very long. Obviously, if you let it stay there a week or more, you're probably going to start to smell it eventually. But I find that it really, and I haven't had any problem with bugs at all or anything.
Question, right?
Yeah, no bugs. People also, they worry about rats being at the drop-off site. We have never had that problem. This whole program is modeled on Scarsdale's program, and they started it, I don't know, it's been at least 6 years now, and they said, can you imagine if they had rats in Scarsdale? There would be a huge outcry and the program would have been disbanded years ago. So believe me, there's no problems with rodents or any of that with this program. And the one key thing is, even if you do it on your own, you need these compostable bags. And there's a, it can't be biodegradable, because all that does is the plastic goes and makes little tiny microplastics. It has to have this actual logo on it, which is, it says, I can't even read that, but it's got this special logo on it, and then you'll know it's biodegradable.
And where can you purchase them?
Well, these you can purchase, even if you don't buy the whole kit, you can purchase these in in Village Hall, and it's only $2 for a roll of 24. Okay. So they're great to just stock up on. I think actually the Stephen Shallow is the assistant town administrator who sells them there, and I think he's selling them in groups of 10 or 20 because he didn't want to keep selling single ones all the time. So, and it's fine, it's really good to stock up on them, and then you just don't have to worry about it.
And how much is the container, and where can you buy them?
Right, so this whole kit is $25, and that's also available at Village Hall, from 9 to 4, Monday through Friday. Or if you come to the Compost Give Back Day next Saturday, we're going to be selling them there as well.
And can you just get the small one?
You can't so far. You cannot buy pieces of the kit. Yeah, I know. We realized that was maybe a mistake. Scarsdale doesn't have as many apartments as we do, and since we modeled it on their program, we never thought about breaking it up. What I find, again, I'm in an apartment, I don't use this. I've turned this into my recycling bin. So I put my my plastic, cardboard and metal in there, and then just carry it down to my trash room. So that's one thing. It may not look as pretty as most people would like. Unfortunately, you do have to buy the whole thing, and then, if enough people ask for this and it becomes a real problem, we may have to work out a solution. But right now, that's the situation. Yes.
I use my own container, and I keep it in the refrigerator.
Yeah, somebody said they use their own container and keep it in the refrigerator. Yeah, that works. Everybody, apartment people have been really resourceful in what they've worked out that works for them. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it. So it's really great.
On the topic of trying to have your backyard more to nature, or for the species to be able to pollinate.
Yeah.
Is there any information on that?
Yeah, and in fact, I'll give you, since you've asked, I only have a few of these. Redford created these wonderful brochures. There's so many resources out there, and I think they list some of them. The only thing that won't be terribly helpful is the landscaper list, because I don't think any of the Bronxville registered landscapers are on that list since Bedford created it. I think, since so many people in Bronxville do not do their own yard work, they hire people to do it, it's really asking for the services and keep asking. Sometimes, if you say, I want my leaves mulched and left on the ground, on the yard, they will do it if you press hard enough. Right. But when they're advertising their services, they won't say that they do that. Right. So it's all asking, and then eventually they'll have to provide those services. Right. But I think that lists a lot of resources. There's so much information out there. Right. And the Bedford Healthy Yards newsletter is a great thing to get, because
Healthy Yards.
Yeah, Healthy Yards. They sort of created that Healthy Yards movement in Westchester, and they have so many events. They're having open gardens, later on June 25th in northern Westchester. They're going to have open garden day where you can drive around and visit all these gardens. and it's really fun once you get into it. There's also the Westchester Community College has courses that I've taken at the Native Plant Center. So it's Native Plant Center U for university. And they offer them, you can get a certificate program, but also just if you're an amateur interested, you can take courses. The Redefining the Landscapes of Bronxville is a book that the Historical Conservancy, the Bronxville Historical Conservancy, created in 2016. There's a copy in the library. They list all the native plants that are native to Bronxville. It's a great resource in their appendix. And they just went through and listed trees, shrubs, flowers. It's a really great resource because they're listing everything that was here, like in the beginning.
Right.
So it's really, and there's so many other resources, and they're all going to blank. I'm going to forget them now, but there's just innumerable resources out there. Once you start digging around, and also go to the, start out with the Green Committee website. We have a wonderful website that my colleague created from scratch. We spent zero money on it. I'm really proud. She used Google Sites and created an entire website that's chock full of information with not spending a dime of the village's money on it. But it's a really great resource, and that will lead you to the other resources as well. So please do that. So I have handouts about the food scrap recycling, and especially this one because it lists all our programs, and then about recycling on the back of it, just some tips for it. And feel free to take brochures. How am I doing on time? So any other questions or comments? Yeah. Do you have another question, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, are any of the cherubs in the Bronxville Middle School or St. Joe's involved in this?
The question was, are there any other cherubs from the Bronxville schools or St. Joseph involved? We try to involve them in the Giving Garden. So Dave, although he's not going to do it this year, but he's invited the nursery school, Eliza Frost Nursery School, the Reformed Church Nursery School. Those groups will go over there regularly in the spring. He has admitted that it hasn't worked out when he's had them plant things. The germination rate is very low when toddlers are planting, whatever. So he's not going to let them plant in his raised beds, but he'll have other projects. And last year they planted sunflower seeds, which was really a great project, and lined one side of the garden. And there was one sunflower that was like 3 times higher than all the other ones. And it looked very comical, but yeah, we would love to do even more than that. And again, we would love to find somebody who's an educator who's willing to volunteer their time, because then we could expand that programming. I think right now Sue Brownie is the director of the Giving Garden, and she's going to take over a lot of that teaching the nursery school kids. And we've had a couple groups from the high school and middle school have come over, but not on a regular basis. And I had the privilege a couple of years ago of bringing some kids over from Yonkers, from the I forget the name of it, daycare community center, and they loved it. I mean, they hardly ever got outside, and just I had them weed, and they would take one weed and bring it over to the compost pile, and then go back and get a second one and bring it over, and they were carrying it like a treasure. And then they were all muddy at the end, and one guy said, "Oh, are we going to get trouble because we're all muddy?" And I said, "No, that's the whole point of a garden, to get muddy." And he was, he wasn't quite convinced that it was safe, but we, hosed them all down, and they went home, and they had a great time. So it's just, I really love bringing the kids over. Just this past Saturday, we had a litter cleanup event, and we involved the middle school character and community group, and then because not enough of them signed up, we got some scouts involved too. So that was a really successful event as well. A lot of fun.
Do the kids enjoy the worms and all that?
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I think they do. I don't know how many worms they found in the Giving Garden, but yes, I think they enjoy all of that aspect to it, just the sort of, the icky, gooey part. And I think they would, if anybody's reluctant, if you've got kids at home or grandkids and you're reluctant to do the food scrap recycling. I think they love the yuck factor of collecting their food scraps and, you know, bringing them over. I think there's something to be said for that. It's a great teaching moment.
I didn't realize bones were, you could do that.
Yeah, you can, in a commercial composting facility, because the heat is more intense, they can decompose almost anything that's natural, even popsicle sticks. You know, they've said,
Popsicle sticks.
yeah, I get a little reluctant about that, so I don't encourage people, but they say even those will break down. In a backyard composting situation, it's very different because it doesn't get as hot. And so you can't do dairy and bones, so it's much more limited.
Yeah.
But that's the great thing. And again, another wonderful field trip to go on with your family is the Compost Ed program up in Valhalla. This is run by Westchester County. Alex Jenkelo is the director, and I went up there with Jim Palmer and Stephen Shallow, the town administrator and assistant town administrator. This was in January, a year or two ago. And he is so passionate about composting, and it was so much fun. It's just piles of dirt, and he gets 1,000 pounds of food scrap from Mount Vernon every week. And within the first pile, the food scraps have sort of disappeared and turned into dirt. And then he took a thermometer about this big, and he stuck it in the second pile, and it went from 0 to like 145 in like 5 seconds, and now I can't remember, but there's a perfect range of temperature where the aerobic bacteria work most effectively, and it just zoomed up. It was really hot in that pile, and all that is just microbes that just show up there. He didn't put them there, they just show up there. And then after it's all curated, he turns it into a different pile and lets it sit there for a while. And he said a different set of bacteria takes over. And these are the ones that prepare the soil to receive, to transfer the nutrients in the soil to the plant roots. So it's a whole different set of microbes. I just find that fascinating because that's nature, like at its most mysterious and wonderful. Yes.
Do the restaurants in town participate?
Do the restaurants in town participate in the food scrap recycling program? No, they do not. That's
I'm
another.
amazed because they
Yeah.
cannot recycle anything, and when they have
Yeah.
leftover food, and they have tons of it.
I know. That's another program that I would love a volunteer to take on and do. One of the things I did for the Climate Smart Communities is write a 30-page paper on how we could do things like that. And how we could set up food donation programs with places like Acme or maybe some of the stores in town. But it requires more manpower than I have right now. This is a residential food scrap recycling program, but there's no reason why it couldn't be expanded. We have so many restaurants within a very close geographical area that it would make perfect sense. So it's one of the projects on my list that I would love to be able to tackle. And again, the state offers a lot of resources in how to make that happen. And there are other companies or nonprofit companies that are working in this area. So it's just often connecting with the right information, the right resources, and getting the restaurants being willing to make some changes, which is always hard to do in their processes. So I would love to do that. It makes so much sense. And then the other thing is, right now, unfortunately, we're having to transport our food scraps a fair distance to a commercial recycling, commercial composting place. And so it would be really nice if we found a way to send a place that we could send them closer, and we could, do that closer to home and didn't have those emissions associated with trucking them so far.
Is it a very big plant when you have something like that? Very big, like the size of a building?
The question is the commercial facility for composting big? They're usually outside, not inside, and I think they can be small or big, but you need more land than Bronxville has. That's the challenge. So anyway, that's it, but thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it.